Hello and welcome to today's episode of Owning Your Menopause. I'm really excited for this conversation today. I will be chatting to someone who is a qualified and experienced psychotherapist. She has worked with thousands of women, guiding them through the complex landscape of weight management and wellness. With a calm and sympathetic presence and a deep insight, she helps clients uncover their own answers, empowering them to build a more sustainable and compassionate relationship with their bodies. She is passionate about supporting women to find peace with their history, their habits, and their bodies. She offers a safe space for healing that goes beyond quick fixes, and her work helps clients move forward with clarity and confidence. Today, my guest is none other than the wonderful Sarah Wrigglesworth. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's my pleasure, Kate. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to it very much.
I'm very excited because we not only have we connected, we've also worked out that we do live quite close to each other. So it's hopefully one of those things that we can meet each other in real life quite soon.
Yeah, that would be very nice. That would be very nice. The internet is often regarded as very impersonal. And when we started chatting and then we realised that we literally live about 3 miles away from each other, It gave it a real human element. So it was really nice.
It did, yeah. And we've got some really exciting things that we've got coming up that we're working on. But I guess I want to kind of go back a little bit, and you will find I may deviate from sent questions because that often happens with my brain. But let's go back to what made you specialise and inspired you to focus particularly in this area, but kind of what led Sarah to where she is today.
Okay. So my background is I used to work in public relations years ago, and then children came along and moved out of London down to sunny Sussex and wanted to do something, but didn't want to go back to doing what I used to do. So I thought, what do I fancy? And always loving people's stories and a good conversation, I thought I would embark on the counselling training. And then 4 years later, I qualified and set up in private practice, which I've been running ever since, and that's about 20 years ago now. And I was working in a local private hospital, and they had a weight loss surgery program at that stage, doing a lot of gastric balloons, not so many bypasses and sleeves, although there's a lot more of those around now. And they were finding that although the surgery was going very well, that the individuals were struggling because having surgery is only part of the story, a little bit like the injections, they're only part of the story. And so they were looking to beef up their psychological support, recognizing that the human element of our story impacts an awful lot of our choices. And so they wanted to beef that up to try and get better outcomes with their surgery. So that was quite a few years ago now. And so that was kind of my inroad. And then subsequent to that, I'd done lots of training around eating disorders and obesity and so on, and stayed on that pathway. So it's an avenue I feel passionately about because women's bodies are not always their own in terms of the judgment of others. And that can lead us to feel very uncomfortable in ourselves. And that can lead to all sorts of maladaptive eating and coping. And I just relish the opportunity when somebody steps across the threshold to do some work together to free them from that so that they can separate out their eating from their emotional landscape and hopefully live a more comfortable, balanced and enjoyable life. So it was a lucky opportunity all those years ago when I was invited to get onto bariatric, and it's just evolved since then.
I mean, that is really intriguing because obviously, like you say, when we look at not how far we've come, because I don't think we've necessarily come far in certain aspects of it, but in terms of perhaps of the medications of helping people with obesity problems lose weight, bariatric surgery now, I very much imagine isn't a first choice option now that there are many other ways of doing it. I guess back then, probably like there is now, there were maybe even less talks around or less information around the lifestyle changes alongside that kind of surgery. So just kind of bearing that in mind, and then also thinking about how now prescriptively via the NHS you need a BMI of over 40 to get the weight loss drugs. What were the kind of parameters what are the kind of parameters for bariatric surgery? Is it similar? Is it less? Yeah, can you talk us through that? If you can.
Yeah, absolutely. So the nice guidelines say BMI of over 35 for weight loss surgery. There are obviously enormous differences between the two, between bariatric weight loss surgery and the injections. And you're absolutely right, Kate. When the injections came along, bariatric surgery, particularly in the private sector, just fell away completely as everybody was going for the Manjaros and the Ozempics and so on. So, and there wasn't a huge amount of psychological support. There was a bit, but that's why this particular private hospital was so keen to try and beef theirs up, because they had the wisdom. It was run by a very, very wise hospital director who recognised that psychology plays an enormous part in our eating. And I'm sure many of your listeners and viewers will know that, because we know deep down that who I am and what I bring to my eating influences the choices that I make. But surgery, is a great option. It's obviously life-changing. You can't change your mind afterwards. You can't just stop. So if you've had 80% of your stomach taken out with a sleeve, you're not going to say, actually, I don't want to do this anymore. Whereas with injections, you always have that choice. You can decide not to do it. The other big difference is that it's a very meaty upfront cost to have surgery. In this country, you obviously have options abroad where it's cheaper, but in this country, where obviously you get more support, it's a pretty meaty. I think it's around £10,000 to £12,000. Approximately. Whereas obviously the injections are less, but if you add up the injections over several years, you're not going to be far away from that, particularly with this price hike. So, they're different conversations, and they are both valuable, and both of them involve long-term lifestyle change, emotional regulation to make them a success.
Got one more question on that, and then I'm going to move us a little bit further forward. If you see me writing, it's not that I'm like drawing a picture and not listening. It's that my brain, and I need to write it down so that I know the question. Because obviously, like you've said, the cost implication comes out. I think the one difference is, and I don't know, you are the expert, is that with bariatric surgery, you would have to fulfill the criteria, or can you? We're seeing a lot of women microdosing. Okay, so let's say I was microdosing. I can pay for that privately, I can get it. If I was to go and ask for bariatric surgery, I would surely be refused.
It depends what your BMI is. If your BMI is over 35, you would be up for consideration. I haven't worked in the NHS, so they obviously have their own protocols, and I know that there can be an extremely long waiting list for NHS bariatric surgery, which is why a lot of people chose to go privately. And each private service has a different protocol. So the one that I worked for, we had a pre-op psychological assessment with me, pre-op dietetics, pre-op nurse assessment, and lots of access to the consultant. So we had a very full pre-op preparation process, because my sense with it is that the individual had to feel it was the right thing for them, for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And obviously there are reasons why it's not a good idea. If you've got an active eating disorder, if you're bulimic, if you're psychotic, there are indications where it's really not a good idea. But the majority of the people who came our way, and I've worked with thousands of people who have had bariatric surgery, is they're just people struggling with their weight, and they have tried everything, all the diets, all the opportunities out there, and they just can't get a handle on it. And so bariatric surgery was sort of regarded as the sort of holy grail of weight loss. But you can out-eat surgery too. You can out-eat anything if your mindset isn't in the right place. Yeah. There is no such thing as an external intervention that will solve everything.
Well, and also, I guess with the bariatric surgery, it works different to the GLP-1s. So the GLP-1s obviously gives you the feeling of satiety. It plays with your hormones so that you eat less. Whereas obviously with the bariatric surgery, your stomach is smaller, but your signals are still the same.
With surgery, it does happen for many that they lose the hunger, the ghrelin, because it's affected by the surgery. You obviously have a very small stomach. We weren't doing so many balloons. It was mainly bypasses and sleeves. But you have a tiny stomach. I mean, you have a stomach the size of a ramekin dish. So, the sleeve is like a banana. So you've got a stomach the size of a banana. And with the bypass, it's a small pouch. So you simply can't eat that much. The way that people get around it is that they have slider foods, the ice creams, the chocolate, that sort of thing. And those drivers, which I'm sure we'll come on to as to where they come from, surgery isn't a guarantee. I'm not against any of these interventions at all. They're out there. I think the best thing that we can hope for is that people that choose any of these avenues look to get the right type of support, because I believe that's the magic key.
Thank you for going through both of those options. We're now going to sort of move it forwards, and I guess you've got years and years of experience. What have you noticed about the deeper psychological patterns that make food such an emotional anchor. And I guess especially, because this is menopause chat, women in their sort of 40s, 50s, 60s.
Absolutely, absolutely. So our weight is such an interesting history of our lives. And when we get to perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, I'm postmenopause, hit that hit that phase of life. It's can be a really interesting reflective time of life. And we can sometimes wonder, how did this happen? How did I get here with my maybe increasing weight? And again, I'm sure we'll come on to that in terms of what hormones do in terms of, decreasing estrogen and things like that. But our food stories started way back in our growing up, in what food was in our homes, whether it was love or whether it's discipline or whether it was, expectation, whether it's projection from our mums who were always on the scales. And so we grew up with this silent message that being bigger wasn't okay. And then very often, and my heart always sinks when I hear this, people say those magic words, and then I went on my first diet. And I just think that is the beginning of disordered eating, because it suddenly becomes all about the shoulds and the shouldn'ts. I shouldn't be eating carbs. I shouldn't be eating fat. I shouldn't be eating this. I should be doing that. And it becomes a game of control. And it's fine when we have a rigid handle on it, when we're doing the diet. But as soon as we stop, we haven't learned anything about our deeper selves. And then that just plays out through our lives. I mean, I've worked with so many women who just have yo-yoed their whole lives. They lose a few pounds, they gain a bit. And then as they get older and our estrogen drops and our insulin resistance or our insulin response changes slightly, we carry weight somewhere different in our bodies. We still have all that backstory as well. So it's fascinating. We are the sum of our parts. It's not that we just suddenly hit 45 or 52 or whatever else it might be, and suddenly our body just does something to us. Yes, there's hormonal changes, and that's part of the adjustment. But there's a whole backstory. That also informs where we are at this age and stage, which is why it's an opportunity. It can be an opportunity to reflect on some of that.
I've written down some bits and pieces which I'm going to come back to. I want to just move on from that question, and then we'll kind of sandwich in between that. You've talked about those hormonal shifts. Shall we go there? Because I think, again, like you, some of the women I work with, there's so much self-blame around weight gain. And my story is, or not my personal story, but the story I hear from so many women is, I'm not doing anything differently, but I am gaining weight. I feel more than ever this cohort of women, and this is why I think these conversations are happening, and this is why I think so many women in this midlife stage are taking these weight loss drugs, is that we have grown up with a really, this is kind of the negative narrative around food. We were shown images of Kate Moss, nothing is as good as skinny feels. There was never a strong narrative, which there is now. It was always shrink yourself. So I guess that for women, and my own story was that I did have disordered eating. I very much managed that. But again, obviously I came into menopause and talk us through those hormonal shifts that I guess have an impact on confidence, on weight, on how we see ourselves. Because I think, again, it's that whole package, right? It's not just necessarily the weight gain, it is the confidence. And it all just makes us feel like we need to do something about how rubbish we feel. And it's often, sadly, about the aesthetics.
Absolutely. And then we reach for the quick fix. We reach for the injection or whatever else it might be. And it acts as a sticking plaster because it does make us feel better. It does, take our mind off the fact it takes responsibility away from us. I'm not responsible for my eating anymore. The injections are. So I think it's a really interesting thing. I mean, women's lives are made up of hormonal shifts. So we have puberty, which is a big one. The boobs come and the hips fill out a little bit, and that's when we all want to be skinny and we all want to fit in, and all of that. And then we go through the phases of obviously menstruation on a monthly basis, which is an emotional roller coaster for some. And then we have children, which again is another, not everybody for various reasons, and that's totally respected, but many do. And that again is a huge shift in our hormones. And then we come to the menopause, which is like the next part of our journey, if you like, our adventure through the hormonal life of being a woman. And it comes with all sorts of lenses that we look through. And so there is the sort of archetype of what happens at menopause. Your estrogen drops, your progesterone drops. You might be more likely to get osteoporosis, which is all your wonderful work that you do, supporting women to keep strong and to keep energetic, which is also extremely good for our mental health. And this takes adjustment. And it's a question of what the tools are that we have as to how we adjust to it. So if you are inherently a very anxious person, the symptoms of the hormone changes in menopause are going to be magnified from somebody who has perhaps a slightly calmer and more, a different approach to it. So how we approach menopause is a really big deal. I think nowadays, when I went through menopause, I don't really know whether I went through it or not. I mean, I had various other big things going on in my life. Was that what the stress was about, or was it the menopause? I had a couple of panic attacks. Was that because I was in a situation that I was finding challenging, or was that because it was, I don't know. Whereas now there's all this wonderful information and, all the great work you do here and the publicity around menopause now. I think it's never been a better time to be a woman going through menopause than it is now. Again, it comes back to this thing that it depends how we are as individuals as to how we approach it. And I think that the wisdom comes from reaching out and accessing that support, so you're not doing it on your own, whether it's, your app, or whether it's therapy, or whether it's reading, or whatever it is. Prep yourself. Find out what your choices are, because yes, your hormones are changing and there is nothing you can do. I mean, there is HRT, which I'm a great fan of. I'm on HRT and I like it. It works for me, but it doesn't for everybody. And there are those that choose not to. Again, that's absolutely fine. It's everybody's individual choice. But for me, it was a real stabilizer. And I don't have any plans at the moment to come off it unless I'm told otherwise. So the hormonal shifts are just the next part of our narrative through our lives as being a woman. Going back to your point about, I remember the 90s when it was heroin chic and so on. And then prior to that was amphetamines that you could get to suppress your appetite in the 1980s. You're probably too young to remember that. Sadly, I'm not. But they were really shocking. I mean, your heart was beating like the clappers, but they meant I wasn't hungry. They meant I lost weight. And I did take some in the 80s because I put on a couple of stone when I moved up to London, and I was self-regulating and this, that, and the other. And they were a disaster because as soon as I stopped, I hadn't learned anything. So I had to go through that process of learning, okay, well, what does this mean? Because those clearly don't work. And that's my fear for the injections. I know they're not amphetamines. I know that they are clinically balanced and proven, and they have lots of other health benefits, and they are out there as a support. But the danger is that if you don't do the deep work, when you stop, you've learned nothing, your body's learned nothing, and then it comes back on again. And I think the pressure that women feel now to look a certain way, whatever your age, we're all supposed to look younger. Youth is the destination of choice. And as older women, as we get older, there is a loss of elasticity in our skin. There is, we have to work harder to keep our muscles and so on. All of that we can support and enhance, but it's a factor of growing older, and it's how we meet it and how we approach it. That's where the magic lies.
Yeah, it's, I could listen and pick up on all of those strings and have a million conversations around it, because it, I find it very interesting, because I guess when you talk about your experience in the 80s, I then obviously, and I'm very honest about this, my mum had disordered patterns of eating as well, and I think that they are still definitely there. But so it just seems that literally just for generations, women have wanted to be small. Yet when I'm thinking Marilyn Monroe, and she was curvy, so there must have been at some point, where women were more celebrated or less criticised, and then something changed. But I do want to move forward, and I want to come on to the weight loss injections, because I think that is really important. So I want to talk about someone who takes these injections, who is obese, who has got a clinical reason to, and then I know that the risks will be for both people who are obese and for people who aren't obese. But are there more risks for one group than the other? Are the risks the same? And I want to then move on to talking about the regaining weight when we don't address these issues, because this is where your expertise really lies, and I want to get down and into that before we run out of time. So a couple of bits to that question, but I'm just going to let you follow it.
Thank you. Being menopausal, I'll try and remember what the questions are.
Yeah, don't worry, I've written it down and I can remind you, it's fine.
You might need, if I go off script,
Yeah, no, go off script, because then it means it needs to be said.
Okay, so the difference between people who are clinically obese and maybe with comorbidities, which means they may well be getting the medication on the NHS, means that they're probably under the care of a GP or health practitioner. The people who are buying them off the internet, who may still be obese but not have the comorbidities, and so having to pay for it themselves. I guess probably the NHS people maybe have some more support. I don't know. It's not an arena I'm familiar with because I don't work in the NHS. But there are obviously different drivers, perhaps, for the person who has the comorbidities. If you've got type 2 diabetes, if you've got high blood pressure, if you've got, other symptoms, then maybe the motivation to go on them, and I'm hypothesizing here, is for health and well-being. Whereas I think, in my experience and those that I've worked with, because relatively in weight loss, injections are very new. And just very quickly touching on what we were just talking about just now, one of my great sadnesses is that my sense was that the curvier woman was becoming embraced. You were getting plus size models. You were getting, advocates for people who weren't super slender. And since the injections have come into being, we seem to be going back to where we were. And that makes me really sad. The Hollywood stars who are stick insects, and you can see every bone and this, that, and the other. I thought we got past that. And so that's just like a slight caveat to what we were just talking about. So that's sort of one thing. But in terms of the cohort that are taking the injections, my sadness is that I think the currency is to be thin. And I think as women, we are so much more than that. Yes, we want to be healthy. Of course we do. And we know it's clinically proven that being obese does carry medical concerns. And of course, it's better to be a healthy weight, not super skinny, but just, an okay BMI is good enough. And my fear is that now we're getting back to you're only okay if you're thin. And that takes away an awful lot from what we are as women, and particularly perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause. We have so much wisdom. We've lived for 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years, and we have that wisdom. What is it that stops us accessing that sense of ourselves, that we can be more than, oh, I've lost weight, and gosh, you look great, and are you on Manjaro, and all the rest of it, which is a narrative going on, in school queues, in coffee shops, around the dinner table, the whole thing. And this is what we're modeling for our children. So it's a big discussion. And as I said earlier, I'm not against them. I think that they do have their place, and I recognize that they do impact people's ability to manage their eating really effectively. I would just really hope that there can be some kind of balance in their usage.
I guess then, for women who might be listening and they're considering the weight loss injections, what conversations should they be having with themselves first?
I think it's an opportunity to be really honest with yourself. Am I really wanting something external to me to be the magic wand? Because there's no such thing. And I really hope I'm not cramming across as the doom merchant, because I'm absolutely not. I'm really not. But there is no such thing as a magic wand. We long for that. We're brought up on it as children, the fairy tale of the prince in, the knight in shining armor who's going to come and gallop on his charger and scoop us up and make everything okay in our lives. And Manjaro or Wegovy or Ozempic or the others that are no doubt going to be coming out are not the knight in shining armor. They're really not. They are, I've just thought of an analogy. They are like the rowing boat. They are the boat that you can climb into, but you've still got to row yourself across the pond. It can't get there without you doing your bit. So I think I would say to women thinking about going on to Manjaro or similar, just be really honest with yourself about, are you genuinely ready to make the changes necessary to get the outcome that you want? Because you can do it. We can all do it. We all have neuroplasticity, the ability for our brains to evolve, to learn new things, to do things differently. And we have that right up until we pop our clogs, which is a really exciting thing. So ask yourself, be really honest, look in the mirror and say to that person in the mirror, why are you doing this? Are you ready for what needs to happen for you to really make these work long term? Because they can, and they do. Or use them for the period that you're going to take them, and then have in place that scaffolding that you can still continue, that you can still keep your weight manageable, and you can be in charge of it, not in control, because control is never a good thing, but you can manage it. And then the weight loss injections can be something kind of in the rear view mirror. And yes, you can dip in and out and you can go back and this, that, and the other, but they don't become the crutch.
Can you stay on them for life? Is there research on that yet?
There's very little research. There's very little research. At the moment, I think the line is 2 years, but there's all sorts of research coming out. And we'll have to wait and see on that one.
And then I guess the other question is, I have friends who are dipping in and out, taking it, then not taking it, and then taking it, and then not taking it. Surely this is because of the way the drugs work, and it's to do with your pancreas. It is the bringing in the hormones, the GLP-1s. Is that not confusing the signals? There's got to be some damage there where you're saying, okay, GLP-1s, okay, then have a break, and it's not a natural thing that your body is doing. What's that doing to us?
Well, I think from a clinical perspective, you probably need to speak to a doctor about that. I can come at it from the psychological perspective, but I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you, because they do influence the body's hormones. That's what they do. They slow down as your food, they affect our insulin response and so on, and that's what means that we don't feel hungry. So the ideal, I think, again, and it's very individual, I want to be careful not to be too generalistic, but they are, as I say, they are out there, they are an option. You can go on them, and if you want to get your weight down, because it's really hard when you've got maybe several stone to lose. It's really hard when you're just losing 2 pounds a week, and then somebody says something, or you have a bad day and work's terrible, and you think, oh, sod it, I'm just going to go and see what I can find in the fridge or whatever, and get that comfort and get that soothing, get that dopamine and all those things. So I think the what I would hope is that people can use them if they want to bring their weight down, and then through the process, maybe of titrating off, or as they reduce the dosage, that they really pick up the skills necessary of self-awareness, emotional regulation, dealing with the things in life that maybe you've been eating. Because it's easier to get something to eat than have that difficult conversation with a partner, or deal with the things that are sitting somewhere over here that I don't want to manage. So I'm just going to go over here and find something I like doing better. I know what I'll do. I'll go and find something to eat. So it's a willingness to turn towards those sort of boxes of stuff, if you like, and lift the lid and see, okay, well, what do I need to guddle about in? What do I need to address? And very often we don't know. It's sort of so far in our subconscious that we don't really know. We just know that I don't feel very content. We just know that I seem to have low level anxiety all the time, or that I feel stressed and all of these things. And of course, those things in menopause contribute to your belly fat, because that's what sadly happens with the lowering estrogen, is that we seem to carry more weight around our middles than we do anywhere else. It's one of the other sort of cruel facts of life. But if you can bring your adrenals down, nervous system is a wonderful communicator. If your nervous system is communicating with you, something's not right. And that's maybe what needs addressing. Yes, use the weight loss injections to bring that weight down, and then work with what you've got, who you are, and facilitate that outcome where you don't need to keep dipping back in and out. I think the challenge when you're on the injections is that it does do it all for you. And I know, and I'm a great advocate of saying, emotional regulation and, good diet and da-la-la. But actually, hey, I don't care. I'm losing weight. I don't need to do any of that stuff. This is working for me. So there's no need. The problem is when you stop for financial reasons, or maybe you've run out of time and they won't give you any more, or whatever the reasons might be. And suddenly it's like you're at the rock face. And in that lovely article that Alice wrote the other day, the hunger comes roaring back. It does, because the hormonal responses that you've been getting from the injections aren't there anymore. So use them, but use them intelligently. Yeah. That would be my advice.
I've got so much more to ask you. I'm going to keep going for a little bit. Food noise. I've written down, and willpower, because I do think that those are two really important things. And again, just because it's worth me mentioning in terms of kind of the context of my own journey. And actually, there was something else I also wanted to say. So I guess I want to say, when you talked about people being slim again, and I'm going to be very honest, and I am when I have these conversations, I'm not going to lie, it's crossed my mind taking them myself, right? Not to lose weight, but because I have food noise, okay? I manage that. I don't, like you said, the control is a bad word. I manage that. But also, I'm like now, okay, I'm meant to be the fit person. I know that fit is strong. I know all of that narrative. But then I'm like, as a PT, And I saw this wonderful PT, Scottish PT Michael, who did a post on this the other day with another lady, an Irish girl, going, well, PTs should look good and they should look slim and they should be this. And then you're kind of going, okay, so if everybody's taking it, they're going to look like that. Then there's me, and I'm in great shape, right? Like I'm not worried about any of that, but because of my past, because of what has molded me, those conversations do come back. So that was kind of that one thing that I wanted to say, is that I feel you're right. The conversation of shrinking is coming back. And for somebody like myself who has had problems in the past, although I am far from overweight right now, or far from overweight, there's a fear of that happening. Yes. What do I do? And the reason I have that fear is because I have food noise. So every day I wake up, I have to choose and decide what I want to fuel my body with. And I could very easily eat my breakfast, start thinking about lunch, carry on eating my breakfast, snack all day, but I have to go, I am full, okay, I know I'm full, I can feel that I'm full, so go for a walk, remove yourself, take yourself away. I'm not my thoughts, okay, so I'll then say, I don't need to have any more. In fact, my breakfast, big bowl of breakfast is sat there, could have carried on, I don't need any more, I've definitely reached all my goals, and then I'm full. I wait 20 minutes and I know. I've got no cravings now, because what I've done is I've eaten my protein, I've eaten my fibre, I've done my exercise, I've naturally increased my GLP-1s, right? So my body is in a good place of homeostasis, my insulin is balanced, it's all good. Then there's that thing like with the willpower. So this is where I'm having this three-tong thing, because I can now go in the kitchen, right, and my kids might be there and they might be making something and they might be making that. And they'll go, do you want a piece? I've just made some cookies. Or do you want this? Or I've just made that. Now, whilst I might want to, I know how my body reacts. I've got myself in tune with my body. It's been a very long process to learn it. But if I was to have a cookie in the middle of the afternoon, I'd have a massive crash. My blood sugars would spike. I'm better off having something else. Now, that doesn't mean to say that I'm perfect every day. And that's okay. That's all right. It's not going to have a massive impact on me. But I guess it's that learnt thing. Now, I've had many conversations with people about this. And a lot of them are like, well, sort of this food noise and this willpower, like it isn't about willpower, but I do think that, and I'm not the professional here, but every day I have to use willpower, and kind of every day I have to address my food noise. So having said all of that, what is your thought on that? And because I know we've had this conversation, can I ever get rid of my food noise without taking GLP-1 drug?
Okay, do you want the short answer?
No,
yes, you can.
I just want, great, there we are, okay. I knew you were going to say that, which is why I asked it. It's an important question.
Yeah, so that those who want to go make a cup of tea, I'll explain why, but the big answer to that is yes, you can. And I'm living proof of that, because I've had food noise. And through my journey of my profession, but also my lived experience and things like that, food noise is very much part of food. You know, when you go to a restaurant, or you think, oh, yeah, that looks delicious. Oh, I shouldn't have this and I should have that and whatever. Anyway. So, okay, so I think I'm hearing two parts of the question. The first part is that I agree that the word willpower is often used. I'm not a huge fan of the word willpower, because willpower is about control. And when we're in control, we're fine. But when we're not in control, we feel all over the place and we feel lost. So willpower as an idea is fine. But in my experience, the lived experience of it is it just becomes another should and shouldn't from the diet culture. So, I shouldn't have that, and I should use my willpower, and I won't have it. And everything you say about, eating sensibly, keeping your blood sugar steady, which is another whole fantastic conversation, because the emotional benefits of keeping your blood sugar steady are incredible. I mean, that's just another conversation itself. That really is a bit of a magic wand, actually. If you can keep your blood sugar steady, it's a really big deal. But willpower is not what we're after. Self-awareness is what we're after. So willpower is a cheap word that we can use, because it's just like a catch-all. Oh, I just need more willpower. If I just have more willpower. But the reality is that we might have it for a while, but then we fall off, and then we feel bad about ourselves, and our self-esteem drops, and I feel that I've blown it, and my tummy feels a bit distended and uncomfortable, and as you say, blood sugar spikes and so on and so forth. So I would encourage people not to look to flex the muscle of willpower. Food noise is a really interesting one. And so in my experience, there's three elements to food noise. The first one is that you're hungry. So for you, Kate, with what you were just saying, it sounds like it's not that you're hungry. It sounds like you have a great approach to food. It's not piety. It's actually, just having a really great approach to it. Good breakfast, complex carbohydrates, protein, bit of dairy, fruit and veg, and a bit of what you fancy every now and then. That makes up a good diet in my book. And then, thinking, oh, it's been a few hours since I've had anything to eat, my blood sugar's probably dropping again, I need to go and get something to eat. Being able to listen into those hunger signals that we have, because being hungry is not the enemy. The ghrelin that we hear that says, brain, could I have something to eat? I'm struggling here, because your blood system is carrying around all that energy to keep everything going. And then when it drops down, we can feel low, we can feel lethargic, it can make us feel a bit depressed, and we can set ourselves up for a binge. So managing our blood sugar through our diet is really important. And then we can get to listen into our hunger, because it takes about 20 minutes for the hormones from our stomach to get up to our brain to say, okay, we're good to go now. And then we can get on with our day, and I'm not thinking about anything. I'm not thinking about food. So that can quieten down the food noise, the hunger noise. The other two types are emotional, when I'm bored, sad, lonely, or because the kids are making cookies and it's kind of part of the fun and I want to be there and it's so sweet they've made them and, I'll just have one and all the rest of it. That's not about food. That's about so many other things. And so actually it's not about willpower, but it is about recognizing the cookies look fantastic, but I'm fine, thanks. But sweetheart, they look delicious or whatever. So it's not about being a Debbie Downer. It's about recognizing that actually what I'm experiencing around this emotional food noise is not about food. So if I'm sad, if I'm lonely, if I'm bored, if I'm angry, if I'm hurt, if I'm depressed, if that's not about food, that needs a different type of intervention, a different conversation. So that's the second type of food noise. And then the third type of food noise is the diet culture, the shoulds and the shouldn'ts. I shouldn't have that, which is very often people on a calorie deficit, because when I am hungry, the diet is working. No. When you're hungry, your body probably needs fueling.
Yeah.
So then those two cross over. So you've got the oh, I really shouldn't, but I know there's a chocolate in the fridge and I'll just have one bit because I'm going to use my willpower and I'm going to be really, really good about this. And then you get to the fridge and you have the one bit and then the whole lot's gone. And then you have the guilt and the shame and the disappointment and sense of failure, and I'm going to get big again and I was doing so well and all of that sort of thing. Again, that's not about the food. It's about stepping away from that perhaps historical, you mentioned about your mum, being very conscious of her weight and things, messages that probably go way, way back. Hypothesizing, because, we're not sort of in that space together, but, there may be some stuff that would like to be aired. I don't know. Yeah. And I want to be super respectful because you're so lovely and honest with what you share. And I think that's such a lovely thing for this in our conversation, but also for the people to hear, that even being in this position can have its challenges. Yeah. I've been doing this a long time now, and I have had times in my life where the bar of chocolate in the fridge has been what I've eaten, where the food noise is going on and the shoulds and shouldn'ts. I've been there. And through my own evolution, my own, work that I've done and but also the professional work that I now do, I can say that, yes, it is possible to stop food noise because it's about all of that. But that's not a quick fix, and it's not in an injection.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, I would really love at the end of our time today for people hopefully to go away with a sense of hope that it is possible to iron out these sort of kinks in the road that people struggle with and that sabotage them time and time again. There's this, I don't know if we've got time, Kate, but I just want to share a rather lovely story or whatever about there's a woman walking down the road and there's a hole in the road. And the first time she walks down the road, she doesn't see it and she falls in the hole. The second time she's walking down the road, she sees the hole and she's aware that it's there, but she still falls in the hole. The third time she goes down the road, there's still a hole in the road. She knows it's there, but she goes round it. And I just think that's such a lovely sort of analogy of what self-awareness gives us. The fridge will always be there. The cake with the friend in the coffee shop will always be there. It's just a question of whether we choose to keep falling into the same hole or whether we want to go, yeah, I know the hole's there and, okay, but actually I think I'm going to go around it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Do you know what? That made me think of like another question, and I know we could be here forever because I think also on that side with that is that when you say no to the cake, right? So let's say you go out and you've worked out that if you fall in that hole, it's not good, so you go around it. You're judged, right? So I do feel like the difficult part of the whole thing is that you are slightly damned if you do and you're slightly damned if you don't, because often if I say no to the cookie, oh, you want to you on a diet, you not no, not on a diet, I just know that it will make me feel crap and I'll crash. And it was very much like when I gave up alcohol, well, why would you? Because I couldn't sleep, I had hot sweats, I felt like crap, so I did that for myself. And I think that this is where it is so difficult, and probably why a lot of people feel shamed for taking the weight loss drugs. Shamed if they are, shamed if they're not. Like, we live in a very complicated world, I think is what I'm trying to say, where,
Yeah.
I guess my point is it's okay to have the cookie if you want and you know what's going to happen, and equally it's okay to say no to the cake if it doesn't serve you.
Yeah.
It's your choice, your body.
Totally. Totally. Absolutely hit the nail on the head. I think I put out a post or something about it recently, about this idea of who do we give our power to? Do we want to make the decisions for ourselves, in which case it looks delicious but not for me, thanks? Or do we want to think, oh, she'll think I'm on a diet, or she'll think, this, that and the other, so I better have it. If we give our power to other people, we will always be on the wrong foot, because all the other people have their own agenda. They maybe want you to have a cookie so that they don't feel bad for having a cookie.
Yeah.
Or, oh, you're no fun. Well, if you're only fun because you eat cake, maybe that friendship needs to be called into question. So if we can keep ourselves, it's called the locus of evaluation. If we can keep our locus of evaluation within ourselves, what feels right for me? Not from an unkind or a dismissive place, but from a kind and compassionate place. What feels right for me? I think I'm going to say no to that invitation, or I think I'm going to go and say, right, kids, I'm off to bed now because I'm feeling tired, or whatever. It's doing it in a kind way. It's not about being, all antsy about the whole thing. But if we, particularly as we get older, where our roles in life are changing, our kids are growing up, we're maybe becoming grandparents, we've got all these other shifts that we've been talking about today going on, I think it's even more important that we just spend some time being kind to ourselves and go, kind of, what do I want out of this? What are my goals with this? Because then you can say, to whoever, not for me, thanks, it looks delicious, but I'm fine. And people very quickly get bored.
Yeah.
And, kids just want mum's love. They just want acceptance and a secure attachment. They just want to be told they're fantastic and that the cookies look delicious. They're not really that bothered if you eat one or not. They just want a feeling out of it. So and I think it's a really empowering thing if we can begin to start this conversation with ourselves about this sort of internal sense of what's okay for me, again, from a kind and compassionate place. It actually is lovely for other people too, because it gives everybody the choice for them to hopefully make their own decisions.
And again, there's so much to it. It's so complicated. I'm going to ask you one last question, and I think you've kind of covered it, but a nice, summary. If you could give one message to women navigating weight and body image during menopause, what would it be?
I think that's such a lovely question, and it's a tough one because I just love this whole arena, and there's so much to think about and say. But I think I would say, as a postmenopausal woman, I would say that going into menopause, going through it isn't the end. It is a meaningful stage of life, and as we've touched on, like puberty, raising children, going through the hormonal journey of a female life, menopause does bring its challenges. And it's really important to acknowledge that it's not possible for everyone just to pick themselves up and charge into the future, creating some sort of new life as such. It does have challenges. There isn't an adapting necessary, but there are also opportunities to learn and grow. And I think that that's really important to be aware of that. I think also be curious about yourself, the person you've become over many years, and don't be afraid to gently explore maybe what still serves you and maybe what no longer does, because it's never too late to evolve. So, be interested and brave enough to turn towards whatever challenges you may have, and then to think about, okay, what choices do I have? How can I choose how I meet this? What am I going to do? And yes, family and friends are very supportive, but no one else can live your life for you. We have to make our own choices. And researching, reading, using like your menopause app, doing exercise, maybe embarking on some therapy to help you get to know yourself better. You don't need to be in crisis to go into therapy. It's just a lovely space where you can say whatever you think, whatever you're feeling, and there's no repercussions. It gives you a chance to hear yourself, and that can be a really powerful thing. So I think I would say, don't be afraid to reach out for support if that's what you feel you need. And there are choices out there, and whether it's the injections or whatever, they're part of the mix. They can definitely be part of the mix. But be interested in you, be compassionate to you, and don't be afraid to turn towards the things that you might think might be a bit uncomfortable and a bit challenging, because there's huge growth opportunities when you choose to do that.
I love that, and I've written down be curious, because I like that, and I'm definitely very curious. Thank you so much for that conversation. I could have chatted to you all day. Before we go, I want to obviously let people know, and I'm hoping this episode will come out before we get to do our brilliant workshop, The Shift, which you are really excitingly a part of on the 7th of October. So we'll make sure this episode goes out before then so that people can come along for that day. But if they can't come for that day, where else can they find you, Sarah?
Okay, thank you, Kate. So I'm on Instagram at Sarah Wrigglesworth Therapy, and so you can find me there. And that has a link to a website, and you can get in touch. If anybody's interested in exploring the idea of therapy, I'm very happy to have a chat, even if they decide not to progress or whatever, just to open the sort of door to that potential. So, if people want to find out a bit more, they're very welcome. But yeah, people can find me there. And I'm super looking forward to October the 7th. I think that's a really lovely opportunity where I'm going to be, touching on more of what we've been talking about today and so on, and making it really personal for people, because we have more potential within ourselves very often than we realise.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Have a lovely day.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
You too. Bye.
Bye.